Hey guys, Rollout here, and welcome back to Builder's Block, the weekly show that is weekly for a while, until it isn't for a bit, but I'll always get back to doing eventually. And we're back! First of all, very important, right at the top, I want to announce that the Builder's Block Discord server is now open to the public. For a while, it was just a Patreon exclusive thing, but it's become a bit inactive and lacking usefulness, so I'm opening up the floodgates and turning it into a community hub. With that, it means the Patreon tiers are a little different. All patrons will get a unique Discord title and their name listed at the end of every Builder's Block episode. But there are certain things on the server only unlocked for higher tiers, so definitely go check out the Patreon page for details. Or you can go ahead and join the server and ask me any questions there. There'll be an invite link in the description, in the comments. I'll probably make a community post about it, so it's not like it's going to be hard to join. At first I was hesitant to go public because I wasn't sure I could manage it, but I've helped run a couple servers, both public and private, for a while now, so I think I'm ready. What could go wrong? Smash cut to next week's episode when everything is in chaos and hellfire. But until it goes south, anyone is free to join, and I hope to see y'all there. With that said, let's get into this week's builds. You like dragons? 'Cause it's mostly dragons. On the first day, it was suggested to me that I build a color wheel. My roommate had seen them on social media where people took every single Lego color and put them into a organized spectrum. And I got all of my 1x2 plates out. And I wanted to do something like that, but I decided to do something a little bit different than just a basic color wheel. So I turned all of my different colors into this dragon. I like to think that it goes into Ouroboros mode and eats his tail and becomes a color wheel. Obviously, that's not possible here. It doesn't have any articulation. This is just a sculpture, but it's a neat idea. Now, I didn't follow any sort of guide for this. I didn't look at any actual color wheels or look at really anyone else building Lego color wheels to find a particular order of any kind. I just sort of went with intuition here, and I think it looks all right. Maybe a couple things are out of order technically, but that doesn't really matter to me that much. You can see the eye is a transparent brick, and then it goes from violet all the way down to a dark red at the tail. For the neck here, I did some interesting zigzags. I think it sort of represents the spikes on its back or kind of a bunch of scales on its neck. I didn't incorporate any translucent colors aside from the eye. I thought about maybe making it blow fire and making all of the different translucent colors into the flame or giving it like a flame on its tail or something like that. But I thought it looked a little bit confusing, so I omitted anything like that. I really like the way the tail looks. It almost looks like a sunrise or a sunset. It's a little bit Lion King almost. And then here it is from the side. Again, it's got no articulation. It's just kind of on a 2D plane. I did this as simply as I possibly could, but I think it looks pretty cool. And again, I think it's just a little bit more interesting than a standard color wheel. On the next day, I wanted to build something inspired by the Rocketeer. I just had the visual of the Rocketeer in my mind with like the jetpack and the golden helmet and kind of the old-timey pilot aesthetic. But I didn't want to build specifically the Rocketeer himself, just a character with that sort of vibe, that golden age sci-fi look, almost steampunk inspired. So this is what I came up with. I don't know if he's an alien, a robot, or what. He's almost kind of Star-Lord inspired as well in the end. Either way, I think it's a really cool character design. You can see he has the golden helmet, which is almost bird-like, actually. The way I built it, it almost has like a beak and like a feather on the back. On top of being Rocketeer and Star-Lord inspired. In a way, he almost has like Falco vibes from Star Fox, because not only does he have a very bird-like helmet, but he also has this trench coat, which kind of becomes a bird tail. Like I said, he's almost bird-like. Maybe he is an alien. Maybe he is a bird alien in this suit of armor or this space getup. Either way, like I said, I think he looks really cool. He's got a laser gun. He's got some jet boots. I like the way I used the satchel for his belt there. So he has a little sack on his side there for storage. Here he is in kind of a flight pose. You can see that those ankle rockets flip down so that he can jet around with them. I really like the color separation, the gold and the grays and the brown. All that looks really good. Unfortunately, I had to steal some parts from Trowel, my Lego Transformer Trowel, who is brown. I'd really like to keep this guy together. I think he's got a really cool design, just a really cool little character, but he does steal some parts from things that I have currently built. So he's probably going to get scrapped, but that's okay. Here is how his torso is built. Some really interesting things going on here. It uses these rail pieces to kind of give the armor on his chest, like over his undershirt, a little bit of extra layering. And then you can see his helmet is attached with a skeleton leg. A very simple little technique there, but it's extremely effective. It gives him plenty of articulation, and it's a really tiny form factor. So before my next build, I had just uploaded my most recent showcase on the Beyblades. And first I'd like to mention that there were a lot of comments on that video that were something to the effect of, whoa, this is giving me deja vu. Didn't you already upload this video? I feel like I've seen this before. And it's because I showed those Beyblades on Builder's Block like a year ago. That's just how this works. Builder's Block is the work in progress. You're gonna see things here first, but that doesn't mean I'm not gonna do a showcase on them later. Sometimes I'll do a showcase on things I built a year ago on Builder's Block. That's just how it goes. But yes, I did show those Beyblades off in an episode like a year ago. That's where you saw them previously. But I just decided to do an individual showcase on them. Anyway, that was on my mind. I was reading the comments and everything. Of course, a lot of people suggested that I build some metal series tops, like Pegasus and all of the other metal series tops that I don't know the name of. And I'm just gonna say right now that that's very unlikely. I have absolutely zero emotional investment in the metal series. If I build any more tops, I'm probably going to build more tops from the plastic series. I don't know how I would approach upgrades of the blade breakers. Obviously, the ones I built are based on the S series tops. The F series tops are very similarly shaped. They would just kind of feel like slightly different palette swaps if I built them. I guess Drigger is a completely different shape, but all of the other ones are so similar to the S tops that I don't know if it's worth doing, but maybe I could do the V-Force and G-Revolution ones. We'll see. Right now, I'm not super concerned with building any more tops. On this day, what I wanted to try building was a Bit Beast, because that's something I have not seen anyone attempt to do. I actually went on a pretty extensive Google search, and I have not seen anybody build a Bit Beast. Tons of Beyblades, as far as the eye can see. But there isn't a single Lego Dragoon that I could find. Obviously, I started with Dragoon. He's the poster boy for Plastic Series. I'm very nostalgic for the holy bit beasts of the Blade Breakers. And I gotta start with Dragoon. So, Initially, I put this together, just his fingers, because I wanted to use these long horn pieces for his 4 claws, and then I threw this smaller horn piece for his thumb together. And then this is what I based the scale on the rest of his body on. It was my initial basis. He actually ended up being a lot bigger than I expected him to, though. So here is what I had at the end of the first day. I put together pretty much his entire body. Obviously, I started with the head. I wanted him to be super recognizable. I wanted to make sure I had a good head design before I moved on to anything else, and I think it looks really good. Those white horns do come in dark gray, so those will be dark gray eventually. And all of that will be properly colored. His eyes are just white. In the show, in the anime, on all of the Beyblades, he does actually have pupils. Dragoon has very strangely human eyes, and I contemplated using stickers to actually give him pupils. I played around with that a little bit. Nothing I did looked quite right. I still might play around with that a little bit later in the future. I'm not actually opposed to using official Lego stickers on my mocks, like even when it comes to cutting Lego stickers, because obviously Lego sticker sheets have kind of a frame to the actual stickers you use on sets, and a lot of time there's extra little colored bits on them, and I see no problem with cutting those to pieces and sticking them on your Lego mocks. It's Lego. I think that's free game, and I'm not opposed to trying that out to give this guy pupils. Again, I did try it out. It didn't look quite right. Unfortunately, I didn't take any pictures. I really should have, but I might experiment with that more in the future, and when I do, I will demonstrate that in an episode of Builder's Block. But for right now, I think the white eyes are okay. I mean, when Dragoon gets angry and overpowered and full of Beyblade rage, his eyes do glow, so like it's fine that they're just white voids. It does make him look a little bit lifeless, but again, I think he's still recognizable, and I still think he looks really cool. That's one thing about this model. It was so satisfying to build, not only just because this is almost wish fulfillment, this is like a childhood dream. Like having an action figure of Dragoon is so satisfying. It's so cool. But beyond that, he's just a cool dragon. And just having, simply put, a cool Lego dragon on my desk is like really satisfying in all sorts of ways. This guy went together really easily, and on this first day here, I have pretty much his entire body built because it's super repetitive, and I had a lot of the pieces necessary to continue building his body in repetition. One thing about Dragoon that I recognized while building this is that he is extremely inconsistent. Like, from art to art, from generation to generation, Dragoon's details are just constantly changing. Like, in some art, he has 3 spikes like this on his back. In other art, he has like a dozen that go all the way down his back. And then specifically, his tail changes from depiction to depiction. So in the first 2 arts on the S and F Dragoons, he has 2 spikes on his tail, very distinctly, like 2 spikes that stick out the side of his tail, on top of one that is at the very end. Just like this, as you see pictured. And then every single other Dragoon after that has 4 spikes on his tail that come out like a harpoon, like a barb. And from then on, he seems pretty consistently to have 4 spikes. So I'm kind of on the fence about which way I should go. This is, of course, based on Dragoon S, the art for Dragoon S, because my Lego Beyblade is based on Dragoon S, and I'm building a Bit Beast for it. But like I said, after a certain point, he pretty consistently has 4 spikes. So I'm thinking I might try out 4 spikes later, but for right now, he just has the 2. Also, something worth mentioning is that Dragoon's tail is absolutely gigantic, like ridiculously so. You can see he has brackets in the middle here where his legs will attach. He has brackets a little higher up where his arms will attach later on. And then everything beyond that to the tip of his tail is an extremely long tail. And it might seem long here. It's about as long as the rest of his body. But oh no, on the official art, it is so much longer than this. Like, it is insane how long his tail is. And I would make it longer than this as the days went on, but I don't think I can realistically make it as long as it's supposed to be for a couple of reasons. In a lot of the official art and in the show and everything, like, it coils around a lot. Like, it's so long because, like, it coils all the way around him in all sorts of ridiculous ways. Like, it is absurd how long his tail is. And in order to justify that length, it would need to be more articulate than it is. And the only real way I can see doing that is adding ball joints to it so that it can actually coil in a spiral. And I don't want to use ball joints for this, for the simple reason that it would break up his color scheme. I've mentioned this before. This is a trial and tribulation I've gone through many times. They only make toe ball, mixel ball joints in so many colors, mostly grays. And if you want to use them, you have to break up color schemes in ways that I really don't like, especially here. Dragoon is almost entirely blue. He's got a lot of black here. That's because he's unfinished. All of these inverted slopes on his back will eventually be blue. But I would prefer to use all of these hinges for his tail just to maintain that color scheme. And because of that, he can't coil his tail as he should, and because he can't coil his tail properly, making it as long as it should be would be absolutely ridiculous for like weight. He would have so many weight issues, and it would just look silly. So right now, I'm kind of going back and forth on how long his tail should be. Like, what is appropriate? What gets the point across that his tail is just absolutely massive, but looks reasonable and structurally is reasonable as well. So that I'm still kind of going back and forth on. On the next day, I built his arms here. I took those claws that I started with and put them on a pair of arms. You can see I changed the piece that I wanted to use for his thumb into these smaller horns here, and then I used the same horns that I used for his claws as the blades that are on the back of his arms. Now, again, I ran into a couple of problems here. One issue I run into a lot when building at a similar scale to this is symmetry, is when it, like, accuracy when it comes to one side of a model and the other side of a model. For example, on Gridman, I ran into this a lot, where he has a detail on one side of his arm or his leg that doesn't show up on the other side. But because of the scale I'm building him in order to accurately capture that detail, I would need to jump through so many hoops. And so it's just easier to give him that detail on both sides of his arm or both sides of his leg. And the same issue I ran into here. So How I like to justify the color separation on Dragoon's arms, on his body, on his entire figure, is that he has obviously blue scales on his body, and then on his limbs, he has kind of an orange, like fleshy undertone. And then on top of that, he has black natural armor scales. And then on top of that, he has like ornamental additional gray armor. So that's kind of what's going on here. And you can see he has these braces on his arm made out of that, that metal armor. And he has a bar that connects the wrist armor to the forearm armor there. Well, if you look at the official art, he doesn't have that connective bar on the other side, on the inside of his arm. But because of the way I've built it here, he kind of needs to. And I tried a bunch of different ways, using brackets, using bricks with studs on them, using all sorts of snot techniques in order to try and capture that. But it all was just so clumsy and clunky, and I just don't think it's worth it. Sometimes there are details like this that aren't worth capturing accurately. This is just an extremely elegant solution, and it's minorly inaccurate, but I really, really don't think it matters, especially because the number one priority to me for these arms was that they were articulate enough to cross. I really, really wanted him to be able to do the pose that he does on the S-Series Beyblade, where he is crossing his claws in front of him. And in order for this to happen, I needed his arms to be as elegant as they could be, as thin as they could be, so that they could cross together without interfering with each other too much. And so I decided to make them quite simply built, and because of that, they are ever so slightly inaccurate. But to be fair, from the pose here that I want him to do, you can't even see that inaccuracy, so who cares? I'm trying to convince myself that it doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter, right? Anyway, here is how I achieved that crossing arm pose. You can see he has an additional joint in his arm specifically so that his right arm can collapse a little bit closer to his body and leave room for the second arm to cross in front of it. And all of this right here is like technical and spatial know-how that I've learned from building Transformers. It's all exactly the same. This sort of jointage that leads from one shape to another so that things can fit together. This is what it's all been leading up to. All of my years of LEGO Transformer experience has been leading up to getting Dragoon to cross his arms. Continuing on to the third day of the project, I went ahead and built his legs so that his body is mostly complete, and he's just so impressive looking with all of his limbs. I have him in this roaring pose here. You can see that for his legs, I did decide to use ball joints because he has quite a bit of gray detail that is supposed to be there. His legs need to support his entire body, obviously, and his ankles especially need to be very robust and quite articulate, so ball joints seemed like a no-brainer. But even then, I felt limited by it. The proportions are not quite exact here, and I feel like it's because I had to use ball joints. Like, even on a model where things are supposed to be gray, I feel like I would have liked more freedom to make the joint black so that it could be a mostly black leg with a little bit of gray armor on top of it, rather than the gray armor kind of taking command here, if that makes any sense. But in the end, I think it's fine, and again, I feel like this is the best solution for it. Any other solution I tried was just a little bit too bulky or, again, clumsy, so I feel like this is the best way to go here. The mass of black on his upper leg here will eventually be orange. Again, like I said, he's got kind of an orange under flesh, and then he's got black natural armor on top of that, and then gray or silver metal artificial armor on top of that. And the same is true for his legs here, just like on his arms. Now, the connective joint that attaches his leg to his body in most arts is orange, which I was struggling with. I initially had a different hinge here connecting to his body that allowed it to be orange, but there is one or two of his, again, very inconsistent art depictions that show him with a black joint connecting his leg. And you know what? I'll take it. So I used that, and I gave him this jointing mechanism, which allows him to spread his legs a little bit more naturally. And I'm super grateful for that because it makes him look so much more dynamic. Here are his legs from the side. You can see the segmented black and gray armor there, which I think looks especially awesome from this particular angle here. I still think I'm going to play around with those ratios once I have the parts to fully colorize this guy. For right now, I'm pretty happy with it, but it might look slightly different once all is said and done. I also made a couple of small changes to the rest of him. You can see that the proportions on his lower arms are slightly different. I slimmed that down a little bit. I added some wedges to the sides of his body just to give him a little bit more outward mass. I increased the length of his tail a little bit, and then I made his lower tail attached on ratchets so that that's a little bit more robust. And he just looks so awesome. Like I said, I'm very, very happy to have Dragoon. This is something I did not realize would make me so happy when I started building him. But like now that I've got him on my desk, like it's Dragoon and it's so cool. And honestly, I feel like he's got so much more shelf presence than he's worth. And that might be weird to say, but I'm just imagining a scenario where like somebody's looking at my shelf or they're looking at all of my Lego creations lined up at a convention and they're like, whoa, dude, that dragon's awesome. What's he from? And I'll be like, that's the dragon from Beyblade. It's like, really? From Beyblade? Like it seems weird to me that something with so much commanding presence on my Lego shelf compared to a lot of the other things is from Beyblade. Like, I never would have expected that. But now that I've got Dragoon mostly finished, and it's pretty safe to say that I'm going to order the parts to finish him, and I will have, at the very least, Dragoon complete. I kind of want to build the other three as well. It'd be a huge project, especially if all three of them are just as big as this guy. Big old bird, big old turtle, big old tiger. It would look extremely impressive having all four of them. But we'll see. If I were to build all four of them, the next one I would tackle would be Dronzer, because obviously I would just like having Dragoon alone, and I would just like having Dronzer and Dragoon alone. Even if I don't decide to build Drigger and Drasil, like the big fight, the big matchup is Dragoon and Dronzer. Like that could be a display in and of itself. So the next one I'd build would be Dronzer. But I think Dronzer lives and dies on how impressive I'm able to build his wings. His wings are going to be so important in how well that model looks. So on the next day, I did some experimentation with wings. This first one on the left here is kind of a failed experiment. I'd seen a lot of really cool looking bird wings using these Chima elements, and I played around with them a little bit, and I think I just hate this piece. Like, it's got a lot of really cool applications, but beyond just the way it looks, the proportions of it and the form factor and the way you're forced to attach it, I just don't like it. It just doesn't fit my building style very well. That's what I've decided. But I tried it out. I tried this wing design out, and on the right, I came up with this much more complex, much more impressive looking design. So we'll take a look at both of these. Here is that first wing design. You can see that it folds up well. I think it looks pretty cool. I think this can be applied to a lot of different Lego birds. Like, it's an acceptable wing for what it's worth, but it's just not really what I'm looking for in this project. On top of that, it would really limit the colors I'm able to use because these wing elements only come in dark red, and I could make the majority of this entire model dark red. I think it would be acceptable if Dronzer were dark red, but not having to make him that color, I think would be better for me. It would be more appropriate if he were a brighter red color. So here's this wing. Feel free to use this as inspiration for something, but I consider this a little bit of a failed route. But then I came up with this, and I think this is super impressive in a lot of ways. I'm really happy with the overall aesthetic of this sort of wing, but I will say that it's got some problems in terms of applying it to something like Dronzer, which I'll talk about here in a moment. You can see it has all of these feathered segments that come together. It's got plenty of articulation and has a couple of joints in there. Each feather can also rotate, which gives it this like very dynamic look. You can even have it, wave and flap in all sorts of cool poses like this. Like, I love the way this looks, and I think it's super versatile, and it can be used for so many different birds and creatures and things like that. But I think it's very tricky to apply to Dronzer. I've built it here in black and gold, which is already black Dronzer colors. Black Dronzer is a thing that happens in Beyblade. If I successfully build Dronzer, I guess I could recolor it into black Dronzer. Not only that, I guess I could recolor Dragoon into, like, Dark Dragoon and Cyber Dragoon, but maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself there. But anyway, to make this wing accurate for Dronzer, I would need to sacrifice a lot of the jointage, and I would have to change a lot of the ways I attach these feathers in order to get the segments to look proper for Dronzer, because he's got a very particularly segmented wing, and the armor on his wing fits over the feathers in a very particular way, and it's just hard to modify this wing in order to be accurate for Dronzer. So, like, I think this is a great wing. I'm really proud of it. I'd love to use this on something, and hopefully I am eventually able to apply a lot of the techniques here onto Dronzer eventually, because I love the way this looks, and I would love for Dronzer to look this way. But man, wings are so hard, I am realizing. To make them jointed properly and to make them look good in Lego, to make them like collapse properly, and then on top of that, making sure like if it's an armored bird, the armor sits on that wing properly, it is so difficult. Like, it is extremely challenging to capture in Lego. So this end screen is going to look different. I haven't decided yet how I'm going to list all of my Patreon supporters, but I won't know until it's edited. So I hope it works. I'm still figuring that out. Speaking of which, you can help me figure out the new and improved Discord server by joining with the link down below. And I hope that works too. Extra special thanks to my leader class patrons, Valraven, Beyond the Brick, and Beta. And until next week, this has been Rollout, signing off.